Over the past several months, we've seen tons of problems emerge due to mail-in voting. From ballots not being counted, several people actually being indicted for voter fraud charges. In New York, the election was delayed. They didn't know who was going to win, and now they're just calling it for the incumbent, so the race is being contested by the challenger. In Paterson, New Jersey, where we had several indictments and 1 in 5 votes being discounted, a federal judge has ruled the whole thing must be completely redone. I think it's obvious to anybody who's being honest that mail-in voting is broken. Yet still, Democrats insist we must have universal mail-in voting. Where I live in New Jersey, they're going to be sending out ballots to everybody, whether you want one or not, and I'm not happy about it. Because of this, Donald Trump is accusing Democrats of trying to steal the election, and I think there's one really good reason he may be right. Anthony Fauci has already said we can vote in person, so long as we wear masks and maintain proper social distancing. But still, Democrats insist because of COVID, we must have mail-in voting. In response to this, Trump has said he will deploy law enforcement and even attorney generals to polling places to prevent the fraud. Unfortunately, I don't think he can actually do that. So Trump's between a rock and a hard place. If he does try to intervene to prevent fraud, they'll say he's a fascist and he's trying to take over. He's trying to cheat. But if he does nothing, then we're going to see a ton of ballots discounted. We're going to see some dirty games being played, and then Donald Trump may actually lose. But there is another theory that's going around. You see, many people said if Trump delays the election, that Nancy Pelosi eventually becomes president. And this is technically true if Pelosi wins re-election. Her term is set to end on, I believe, January 3rd, and Trump's on January 20th, which means they could certify the results of Nancy Pelosi's run, and then she is the Speaker of the House. Donald Trump's election gets delayed until after the 20th, and then they make Pelosi the president. Now, this could just be a fringe theory, but Trump did bring it up, saying he didn't know if it was true or just a theory. But Nancy Pelosi did say in the past that Donald Trump will be leaving whether he knows it or not. Perhaps just some hyperbole, a rhetorical threat that we're going to win, or the Democrats are seriously playing some very dirty games. I think dirty games are afoot. One story from ABC News says that 46 states will see ballots go uncounted. So if we know all of these problems are happening, why do they insist? And why all of the problems with their primary elections? Perhaps it's because they know this is their in. Maybe not to actually cheat. You know, Donald Trump says they want to steal the election. Maybe it's not because they're going to be forging votes or anything, but they're going to cause such chaos that no one knows who actually won. In the event Trump actually does win, they can accuse him of cheating and say it wasn't legitimate. Or perhaps they will delay the election long enough with constant lawsuits over all of these messed up election results everywhere that Nancy Pelosi becomes the president. I don't know if that's true, but I'll tell you this. Trump's threat to send in law enforcement is serious. It may just be late night TV talk, or maybe he really will try to secure our elections. Either way, Democrats are going to jump on this. So let's read into this and see what's going on. And I've got some stories about the problems we're seeing with mail-in voting. And we'll talk about Trump sending in law enforcement. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's many ways you can give. I got a P.O. box, but the best thing you can do is subscribe to this channel. About half the people who watch all of my videos aren't actually subscribed. So if you see just below the video player, there's a subscribe button. Hit that, and you're more likely to get my videos every day at 4 p.m. when they go live. Don't forget to hit the like button, the notification bell, and share this video if you really want to support my work. But let's read. From the Daily Mail, they say, Donald Trump accuses Democrats of trying to steal the election with mail-in voting and vows to send in law enforcement to polling stations to stop voter fraud. They say the president told Fox News' Sean Hannity Thursday night that he plans to send in troops, including sheriffs, law enforcement, U.S. attorneys, and attorney generals to monitor the election, a move legal experts have cast doubt on. He blasted the November election as the most fraudulent election in history and made the extreme claim that ballots may only be sent out to blue areas of the country. Trump had called into Fox News' Hannity 1 hour before Joe Biden formally accepted the Democratic presidential nomination Thursday, in one of a series of appearances intentionally clashing with the closing night of the Democratic National Convention. When asked by Hannity if you would deploy poll watchers to voting stations to prevent fraud in the upcoming election, Trump claimed, we're going to have everything. We're going to have sheriffs. We're going to have law enforcement. We're going to have, he says, we're going to have hopefully U.S. attorneys. We're going to have everybody and attorney generals. Trump provided no further details on the troops he will send into polling stations or what their role will entail. However, legal experts said the president has no authority to take such action. Rick Hasson, an election law expert at the University of California at Irvine, told CNN, Trump does not have the legal power to deploy local law enforcement officials to monitor elections, but that he could hire off-duty cops for the job. The move could also face a backlash from Democrats who could claim the president was suppressing voters. And that's probably what they want, because even if they do lose, they need something to say, some kind of evidence that Trump's election was illegitimate. So if Trump does have private security, sheriffs, or anybody, they'll just scream, he cheated. He scared people away. And then they'll claim some people who are newly legal citizens or people were scared of getting arrested or people are scared of police. They'll use the Black Lives Matter line that they're worried about police brutality. And so people were being kept away and it targeted minority voters. They will take any excuse they can get. They say the president has repeatedly hit out at mail-in voting and claimed it will cost him the election. But his latest comments also point to him having a seated distrust for in-person voting as well. Trump then returned to slamming mail-in balloting, saying 51 million ballots will be sent indiscriminately, with many being sent to dead people. And this is probably true. They're talking about sending 51 million ballots out to anybody who, nobody knows who is going to get them. It's a horrible thing. It's a fraudulent election. Everybody knows it. You don't even have to know politics to know it. And I'm just going to say this. Most of you, if you follow my videos, you know this. I've actually got a mail-in ballot sitting right next to me for somebody who doesn't live in this house and hasn't lived here for quite some time. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it. But I imagine if there are some nefarious actors out there, they could easily go to any mailbox for anybody they know is neglecting their mail or isn't voting, and they could take it and fraudulently vote. So yeah, there is a real potential for fraud here. Whether or not fraud is widespread, the fact remains there are serious problems with mail-in voting and the potential for fraud. Why are Democrats trying to create a gaping hole in security is beyond me. Unless you want to speculate, they're playing dirty games. This week, the president cast his own vote in Florida's 21st district primary election by absentee ballot. They say mail-in vote, but it was absentee after changing his official residence from New York to Palm Beach back in October, despite his repeated claims that the mail-in system is rigged. Yes, Daily Mail, it's because absentee ballots are different. But Trump told Hannity mail-in balloting and absentee balloting are different, and the latter is very secure. A lot of people use absentee. But that's when you go through a process. You ask for it, they send it to you. It's very secure. There is nothing like going to the voter booth, but absentee is good. Now, in this photo they have, it says the president claimed ballots may only be sent out to blue areas of the country. You can see someone casting a vote by putting it into a big metal ballot box that says 24-hour video surveillance. But that doesn't matter. If some crazy person was trying to threaten the election, they don't need to go up and steal the box. They could just do something awful to the box. And I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but they could easily cast out on the election by doing something to this box that could compromise the ballots inside of it. It's just one single opening. So yeah, there's a potential for fraud. Think about it. With all of the polling stations or ballot boxes just placed in the grass at random places across this country, I say, okay, not necessarily random, but at these municipal areas, people could just tamper with them. And then you're going to see lawsuits endlessly. And that's when it comes to the argument about delaying the election, not trying to steal it, but delay it so that Nancy Pelosi becomes the president. I bring you now to this tweet from Jennifer Jacobs. Trump says there's a mad theory that if there's no final election result by the end of the year, Pelosi would become president, says he doesn't know if that's a theory or a fact. Ben Jacobs tweets, Trump now seems to be suggesting the possibility that Democrats might deliberately avoid counting votes and having a clear winner of the presidential election so that Nancy Pelosi would become acting president. Now, mind you, July 20th, Pelosi did say that Donald Trump will be leaving the White House whether he knows it yet or not. Like I mentioned, perhaps just some strong rhetoric. We're going to win. He might not realize it, but he is out of there. Or perhaps she's betting on the fiasco of mail-in voting and lawsuits and the delay to get her into the office. Let's entertain the possibility with a fact check from USA Today. And the reason I'm doing this is because Trump says they want to steal the election. Well, there's the obvious, more conspiratorial line of thinking that they're rigging everything. They're doing something. Look, I'll tell you this. I think they're playing dirty games. To what end? I don't know. But there's the overt. They're going to try and stuff ballots. They're going to find ballots. They're going to, hide Republican ballots. They're going to disqualify Republican ballots. Trump says they may only send ballots to blue areas. Those are the overt, right? The obvious ideas, the obvious theories. But what about Pelosi becoming president? USA Today wrote on August 7th, fact-checked, President Pelosi? No. House Speaker wouldn't assume role amid Election Day. Now, this fact check, in my opinion, is wrong because it operates under the assumption that if the federal election is delayed, everything is delayed. But what would happen if the election happens, Pelosi wins, but the results of the presidential election are delayed? Then yes, it stands to reason, Pelosi would become the president. Maybe that's the game, they say. When President Donald Trump tweeted July 30th about his qualms with mail-in voting and suggested that perhaps the 2020 general election should be delayed, citing a need to properly, securely, and safely vote, there was a panicked response. Under the Constitution, a president does not have the power to change an election date. That's Congress's call. But if Congress did choose to push Election Day into 2021 and passed the constitutionally mandated Inauguration Day, who would take office on January 20th? President Pelosi quickly trended on Twitter, and screenshots of those tweets were shared on other social media platforms in response to the widespread claim that Nancy Pelosi would be next in line to take office on January 20th if there had not yet been a vote. This is true. She would. However, they say, quote, if the president doesn't get reelected or vacate by Inauguration Day on January 20th, the Speaker of the House would serve as acting president. That means President Nancy Pelosi reads the tweet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if an election gets delayed, doesn't the Speaker of the House become interim president at the end of the incumbent's term? So Trump wants President Pelosi, reads another widely spread tweet, also shared via screenshot on Facebook. Now, on the surface, USA Today's fact check is true. If Trump delayed the entire election, Pelosi would be out of office on the 3rd. And I believe every single member of the House would be out. There'd be no House. Now, that would be devastating because, well, then there's no House of Representatives. There would be some senators, but they would be mostly Democrats. They go on to say, the 20th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says the terms of the president and vice president end at noon, January 20th. If an election had not taken place by the date and successors have not been chosen, Trump and Vice President Pence would be out of office. Behind the president in the line of succession is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. It makes sense to assume she'd then take the role of president, but that assumption ignores two important points. Pelosi is also up for re-election in 2020, and the Constitution puts an end date on the terms of members, too. They say that the 20th Amendment says terms of senators and representatives end at noon, January 3rd. If a federal election were delayed, then no vote would take place to re-elect or remove Pelosi from office. She, too, would have to step down from her position. In that case, the president pro tempore of the Senate, next in line, would assume office as president. Currently, that person is Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican of Iowa. But there's more. If no federal election took place, Pelosi wouldn't be the only member of Congress to leave office. There are 35 senators up for re-election, 22 Republicans. And if they were all removed without any successors, the 100-member Senate would have just 65 members, with Democrats in the majority. Because all of that, those senators could technically then choose a new Senate president pro tempore and thus the president. Republicans might be able to maintain their hold in the Senate thereafter, though. A congressional research service report, Continuity of Government, says that in the case of a Senate vacancy, depending on state law, governors may make a temporary appointment until an election can be held. That means vacant seats formerly held by Democrats could be filled by Republicans or vice versa, depending on the governor's pick. In the case of vacancies in the House, governors can issue a writ of election to fill those vacancies, according to the report. They go on to say the election is unlikely to be delayed, and thus their rating is false. Nancy Pelosi will not be the president. In this circumstance, it would not matter if Donald Trump sends out law enforcement because they're just trying to delay the election only for the president. They want the congressional election to carry out like normal so that Nancy Pelosi is reelected and then she is next in line to become the president. And let me just tell you, the Democrats refuse to let go. They refuse to lose after they've lost. Hillary Clinton still won't shut up about it. And I'm going to show you something that's going to make you laugh. Check this out. Noah Rothman tweets, "This is becoming unhealthy." And in this image, we can see from C-SPAN, Democratic governors get it done. Progress in red and purple states. And here we have Governor Tony Evers, Governor Andy Beshear, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Tim Walz, and then you have Stacey Abrams. She's not a governor. She lost, but she won't stop. She won't. Neither will Hillary Clinton. These Democrats refuse to accept that they lost. So here's what happens next. In Paterson, New Jersey, where there was literal cheating. There was accused cheating because several people have been charged, indicted on voter fraud charges, which I believe they're denying, and they are innocent until proven guilty. 1 in 5 votes were disqualified, and now a new election is being ordered in a race marred by voter fraud charges. This is unacceptable. What happens? You have this one district in Paterson, New Jersey. So what do you think is going to happen when you have a presidential election with widespread mail-in voting? What you see in Paterson, you will see everywhere. And then what? They're going to call a redo, a new election? And then, at least temporarily, Nancy Pelosi becomes president? It could happen. Marco Rubio said it. There's not going to be an election night. Many people have said there will not be election night. Why? Because of mail-in votes. And then you're going to see this. Donald Trump on election night with in-person voting will have a strong lead. They'll argue, well, normally this means Trump should win. But Democrats are being encouraged to vote by mail, even though Fauci himself said you can vote in person. So then they're going to start finding new mail-in ballots as they trickle in. Joe Biden will come closer and closer to winning. We'll then see contested elections. Donald Trump will file suit in many different areas. Joe Biden will counter with lawsuits. The whole thing will be jammed up. And then on January 20th, they'll say, well, we can't do anything about it because of Trump's lawsuits. It's his fault. Nancy Pelosi becomes president. How about that? Don't take my word for it. According to ABC News, on the 15th, mail-in voting rules in 46 states may leave some ballots uncounted, USPS warns. If you love the Postal Service, then heed their warning. The ballots will go uncounted. And there it is. Trump will have no choice but to file a lawsuit against this because they're going to discount his votes. If you thought the year 2000 with Gore v. Bush was bad, wait till you have mandatory universal mail-in voting because of the likes of Phil Murphy in New Jersey. I did not agree to this. I've lived in New Jersey for several years, and now they're forcing mail-in voting upon us, and it's going to be a disaster. It absolutely is. We've already seen the evidence, and they're telling us right now. Trump is suing New Jersey because of this. They say the Trump campaign on Tuesday filed a lawsuit against New Jersey after Governor Phil Murphy issued an executive order requiring every voter in the state to receive a mail-in ballot, in addition to being allowed to vote in person if desired, as a safety precaution during the coronavirus pandemic. Oh, this is going to be spicy. So what? I'm going to get a mail-in ballot even though I intend to vote in person? And then what happens? Duplicate votes. They're going to claim some people voted twice. It's going to be utter bedlam. And they know it. They absolutely do. The AP story. A judge has ruled that a new election will be held in November for a disputed Paterson City Council seat just weeks after the race's apparent winner and a sitting councilman were charged with voter fraud. But what about the Democrats? Are they in unified in their calls for mail-in ballots? They're not. And this is what's really interesting. We have this story from the AP that says, from Politico. It says the AP calls primary for Carolyn Maloney over challenger Suraj Patel. Suraj Patel is arguing that the results are preliminary and it's not fair because ballots are being discounted. And you know what the Democrats are saying? These challengers to the establishment Democrats are just fueling and agreeing with Donald Trump's rhetoric, accusing mail-in voting of being broken. That's the game. You're either with us or against us. The Dems don't like the progressives either, so here it comes. They say, the Democratic primary results have been up in the air since June 23rd. This story's from August 5th, mind you. It took, over a month to finally figure out who won, and it was still preliminary. They say the AP called the race for Maloney after the City Board of Elections certified the results on Tuesday. Patel said Wednesday he would not concede. I'm thrilled the voters of New York's 12 have decided to return me to Congress for another term, with a decisive winning margin that clearly reflects the will of the voters. Maloney, who represents parts of Manhattan and Queens and chairs the House Oversight and Reform Committee, said after the elections board certified the results. A judge has ordered the Board of Elections to count more ballots in the race in response to a lawsuit brought by Patel, an attorney and professor, and other candidates. Thousands of ballots that were received soon after the election weren't counted because the U.S. Postal Service did not postmark them. New York law says that mailed-in ballots are tabulated if they're postmarked by Election Day. The judge ruled that ballots received within 2 days of the primary should be counted. The state plans to appeal that ruling. Talk about absolute chaos. Who's cheating here? I don't know. The challenger is saying these aren't postmarked, but they should be counted. So they very well may be bunk votes. I don't know. They weren't postmarked. Where'd they come from? I have no idea. Or they're being discounted because the United States Postal Service couldn't get them in on time and chose not to postmark them. Whose fault is that? Not the voter. But we know that's true. In defiance of that order, the Board of Elections has preliminarily certified our race without a final vote tally. Let me repeat, we do not have a final vote tally or final percentages in my race, Patel said on Wednesday. Quote, my opponent has pressured me to concede, maliciously and falsely conflating my fight to count every vote with Donald Trump's baseless attempts to discredit vote by mail. This behavior is beneath the dignity of the Democratic chair of House Oversight and is deeply concerning. The democratic process does not end when it becomes politically inconvenient, Patel said, adding that the state has argued he would not have standing to continue the lawsuit if he concedes. I bring this up for one important reason. First and foremost, dude, there's clearly problems with your election, so stop dragging Donald Trump and point out the election is busted. But how about this? Nancy Pelosi's election. I mean, she's in a D plus whatever district, 30 something. I have no idea. It's always going to be Pelosi. However, what happens if Republicans file lawsuits challenging the certification and she is not certified? The Board of Elections doesn't certify that she won, and she does not then get reelected in time for her to become president, interim president, as it were. And then it falls to Chuck Grassley. And what would Chuck Grassley do? I have no idea. But if there is a jam up for Trump or for anybody, then it stands to reason it could affect the entirety, every single race that's set to happen in November. And you can thank the Democrats for this. So right now, we have the obvious politicking. We have Joe Biden accepting the nomination, saying that, Donald Trump casts a dark shadow. Then we have Mike Pence saying, oh, Joe Biden, the whole DNC was nothing but darkness. Both sides claiming they're right. Both sides claiming the each side is corrupt. But I leave you with one thing. Anthony Fauci said we can vote in person. Shouldn't this whole debate be over with? Why are they trying to change the rules at the 11th hour? I have no choice but to agree with Donald Trump. I think at the very least they're playing dirty games because they're trying to somehow jam things up, steal the election, cheat the election, or at the very least claim that Donald Trump's victory is illegitimate. So what happens when all of us point to Anthony Fauci and say, okay, we agree with the guy you love so dear, but they don't listen? That's the name of the game. The Beltway narrative, the politicos, they're in the bag for the Democrats. They are not going to be pointing out what Fauci said. Why? Because it discredits everything they're claiming about COVID and mail-in voting. And so now they're arguing they're doing the right thing, but they're just conspiracy theorists and they're trying to gem up the elections for whatever reason. I'll tell you what, after everything you've seen, you tell me why they're doing it. If you don't think it's because they're trying to somehow play a dirty game to either steal or benefit themselves, then explain to me why they are defying Dr. Fauci. I think it's because it's dirty games. But again, you tell me. Comment below. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastNews. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.